This episode of Bulletproof Cash Flow is brought to you by Realty Dynamics. Learn how people like you can build substantial passive income while creating wealth for the long term through real estate investing. Visit rdyne.com. That's RDYNE.com.
During a recession like what we're headed into, during economically tumultuous times, is when more small businesses get started than any other time in history. And so I'm seeing it pop up where people have been laid off. They've maybe they see the writing on the wall and they're chasing that dream. They're moving out of New York. They're selling for $1 gajillion bucks. They're moving to your end of the world where they can buy a nice house, have a nicer life than they had in New York City, and have some money left over to start a business. And that's where you're seeing that business expansion, that business growth in the small business areas. And when you start applying inflationary problems to businesses, usually businesses pass that on to the customer. The customer is the one that's struggling with it. So there's that balance for sales. But if you've built a good business, you're not struggling for sales. Your customers understand because they're all having to deal with it.
Working because you want to, not because you have to, is financial freedom. And we want to help you create that. Welcome to the Bulletproof Cash Flow Show. We're going to teach you how to achieve lifetime financial freedom through real estate investment. Your host is a multifamily syndicator and property developer. He's done deals reaching into the hundreds of millions of dollars. You'll hear from experts in all aspects of real estate investment, finance, development, and management. Everything you need is right here. This is the Bulletproof Cash Flow Show. And this is your host, Augustino Pintus.
Hey everyone, it's Augustino. With a great deal of cap rate compression taking place for stabilized multifamily, many developers, myself included, are pushing into alternative assets like development and industrial and net lease and other types of assets. And it's really to meet market demand while still providing good returns for investors. Now, our next guest is making the same sort of moves, right? With over 25 years of experience, he has been involved from start to finish on over $350 million in construction projects, such as multifamily, office building conversions, mini storage, and much, much more. Along with his knowledgeable team at Shannon Robnett Industries, he is dedicated to sharing his expertise and delivering top quality projects that bring in numerous passive income streams to his syndicate partners. Now, with all that, I'd like to welcome Shannon Robnett to the show. Shannon, buddy, thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate you having me here. I got to update my bio because we're actually over $400 million at this point in development stuff. But, who's counting at this point, right? 27 years in the industry, I can't remember all of them.
Hey man, listen, I'm always counting. It's all right. 50 million is 50 million, man. Can't ignore those little bills. Never ignore those little bills, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, guys, if you like what Shannon has to say, reach him via his contact page at shannonrobnett.com. We'll include a link in the description. Okay, Shannon, go ahead and tell us just a little bit about your journey. How'd you get started in all this?
I grew up in a construction family. My mom was a third-generation realtor. My dad was a builder and a developer, and so I was an indentured servant most of my childhood, and I hated it. And I decided I was going to go to college, and I was going to be smarter, and I was going to be somebody. And computer information systems in the early '90s was where everybody was going, and I was headed that direction. But I just couldn't pay attention in college while my younger brother was out building houses and making $50,000 a year, building 3 houses a year, while I was waiting tables and making coffee. And so I went back into the industry that I grew up in, and I started building houses. I realized I didn't like homeowners, so then I kind of switched to the commercial side of things. We built police stations, fire stations, hospitals, schools, medical office, city halls. We did it all, and I realized that as soon as I got done building the building, I was done getting paid. But my dad retired at 50 with cash flow. And so I'm sitting here looking at what I'm doing, looking at what he's doing, and I was doing so much more than my father had done, but he didn't have to work anymore, and I still had to go to work because the machine needed to be fed. And so at the end of the day, I began to build a real estate portfolio. In 2001, I built my first industrial building. And I still have 2 of the same tenants in the building that were there day one. And so they've been there for 20 years. One of them, the guy makes gelato ice cream, right?
Wow.
And I mean, where are you going to put an 1,800 square foot ice cream factory? You're not going to put it in your garage. So he's going to be there forever. In fact, the business has sold 3 times, but the same business has new owners. They show up on Wednesday, they make ice cream, they put it in the freezer, this big walk-in freezer. They come back and distribute on Friday. And I have a lot of those little guys, right? And so I began to build that cash flow that then allows you to not have to worry about tomorrow, regardless of what else is going on in your life. Because now when I go build a building, that building then continues to make me cash flow, because over the last 5 years, we've transitioned out and we now no longer build for anyone else other than our own stuff. And we do everything from multifamily to industrial. We are doing another office conversion in a syndicated model. But we're building for ourselves, because that is the original value add. That's taking the sticks and stones and making a cash flow asset out of it.
Nice. So when you're developing, you're building, this is your own group. This is your own GCs, or are you subbing it out, or a little mix of both, that kind of thing?
We were our own general contractor, and that's all well and good, but that takes a certain amount of bandwidth to be a GC. Doesn't matter how big you are, it still takes bandwidth. And what I've really decided over the last 18 months of really kind of, this has been my identity, right? For all my life, I've been a general contractor, and part of my identity is tied up in that. So what I've done is I've now outsourced that, and I have some other people that I'm working with. We've developed a model that works for us. That's a cost plus. It's a design build. We start from the very beginning with the right subs, the right general contractors. We put the deal together. Everybody knows everybody's going to make money, but nobody's going to get hammered with change orders. And we've now outsourced that liability, which gives me back the bandwidth, which allows me to go do more projects, which I'm more profitable on the development side than I ever was on the general contracting side. So it was kind of give up one to get two, but you know how we are. We don't like to give up one, right? It feels like losing.
Exactly. But it's a psychological trick, right?
Yeah, it
really
is. It is.
It's like
I've tricked myself to believe that I'm going to be okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I ask because right now we have multiple projects here in Cleveland that we're running, and we have a partner on the. Well, it's not like a partner in the deal, but I call them a partner because we've done many deals with this design build company. They're excellent at what they do. But I often start thinking, it's like, wouldn't it be great to have our own company to do the same sort of thing? And I figured that out too. I already figured that out. It's not worth it.
And COVID really exemplified that. When we couldn't get Windows, it was my fault. When we couldn't get switchgear, it was my fault. But now it's somebody else's fault, right? The same problem exists, but I don't lay awake at night wondering about where am I going to get my Windows. I'm letting them solve that, because we have an end goal and an end date. But what you did say about using the same guy again and again and referring to him as your partner, I think a lot of people lose sight of the fact that that is the best relationship you can have, because you can go bid it out. You can find the guy that cut the price the lowest. I mean, we have the same group of subcontractors in an area. Nobody's got a secret sauce. You're finding a winning combination. In my apartment complex we have under construction right now, my interest is $3,700 a day. There's nothing in the numbers in the bid that will cost me more than my interest. So why am I so concerned about getting the cheapest guy in there? I need to be able to maintain the shortest schedule. And in order to maintain that shortest schedule, I need to work with the right partners that understand what I need first, and not be worried about, can I get cheaper laminate if I wait 2 weeks?
Yeah, exactly. That's the important part right there.
Absolutely.
I was talking to a gentleman the other day. He's new to the development space, and they're trying to build out the entire PM in their company, and basically manage the GCs themselves. And I'm like, man, no, you don't do that, man. Don't do that at all. Like these guys are pros at what they do, right? And to your point, if they know where to find the stuff. If they need windows and A, B, and C are all dead, if they're out of business, they have no inventory, whatever the case may be, they have D, E, and F right behind it to try to fill that need. Like they know where to get it.
They also have the relationship.
Yeah.
they've been working with Phil over there at XYZ Window for 22 years, and they know the area and they know the stuff. And, then now we're starting to do stuff in Texas. We've got deals going in Florida. And I'm not going to send guys out there, try to create that, support that infrastructure and thing from, 2,200 miles away. I'm just going to go into the area, find a general contractor that already has all those relationships, and then make that happen that way.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. So obviously you're very strong on development, just like I am too. And I mean, we are developing a lot of multifamily stuff. There's a need. There's a need. That's what people say. There's a need for this stuff. I think the stuff that we're building, though, is mostly, A minus type of housing, right? I'm not worried about it. I mean, like I said, there's still a need because we're doing mostly urban infill and office conversion in like prime areas here in Cleveland. So I imagine you're doing. I know you're doing some of that stuff too. I think, right? You said.
Yeah.
Right, but I know you're also heavy on industrial. You're very strong on industrial and very strong on multi-tenant as well. Multi-tenant lease as well. So before we move on to those two other assets, though, when you hear, this is going to be an interesting question. When you hear about a housing shortage, who specifically do you think that housing shortage really pertains to? Is it for everybody? Or is it a certain segment?
Well, look, what we're seeing in the market right now is we're still seeing single family, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes still have multiple bidders on them. When you get into the 4,000 square footers that the baby boomers are downsizing out of, those will sit on the market for 4 months, right? So the housing shortage is on the starter end of things. It's on look, we're getting ready to graduate another class, right? A third of them are going to go to either the mission field or the military, right? Both of those are not going very far. A third of them is going to go to college, and a third of them is going to go to work, right? Now, you've got the opportunity to get, when you look at this, we probably have 5 to 10 million kids going to graduate this year, right? Just coming out of high school. We're not talking about been living with mom and dad, found a steady date, they're going to get married. We're not talking about any of that. We're just talking about 5 million kids that are going to be of age. And if you've got, let's say you're putting 800 of them into the market, you've got 800,000 new potential homeowners and or renters coming out that are just in the pipe. And we're going to do that for the next 3 years, 4 years without change. But we all have the backlog from 2008, 9, 10, 11, when we weren't building anything, that's still not going to get caught up. So when you look at it, apartments are positioned right in there. And then when you raised interest rates, you put that right out of that home ownership, right out of half of those people's reach. So now they're going to be apartment bound for another 5 years, and you got competition coming in. So I'm seeing that being in the apartment space, in the affordability area, as well as the not necessarily the Class A, but the brand new B plus, where your people are coming together and they were wanting a home. They're qualified buyers. It's a little bit too expensive right now. I think you're going to see a very, very strong market to continue. That is going to be, demand based. And so, you're not going to need the 2,000 square foot penthouse in downtown New York. You're going to need, the 2-bed, 2-bath, in rural, just outside of Cincinnati or Cleveland, where they can commute to work and get to their Amazon jobs,
Yeah.
That's really what I see the need is.
Yeah. That's the stuff we still own, and that's the stuff we're building. We're building
exactly
like in the urban infill. We're building right next to the hospitals.
Yep.
One's near Metro Health, which is a smaller hospital, but everybody knows Cleveland Clinic. We're building right next to that. So we have 50, 60 million of project right there right now. So it's phenomenal.
And that's you're looking at that and people are going, okay, gas has gotten so expensive, cars have gotten so expensive. If I sell my car and I live right next to my job at the hospital, I've now saved myself $300 by paying $200 more in rent. But I'm in a brand new place. I'm right here. I can walk to work. Those are the kind of projects that to me will continue to make sense.
Yeah.
And
that's
the reality
that's the
is,
logic. That's the
that is
logic
absolutely
too.
the logic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reality is those of us that have employees are very concerned right now that our good ones stay paid. And so I'm looking constantly out at the marketplace going, what's the marketplace going to do to my people that I don't lose them? So I'm having to stay competitive. There's some that aren't getting the raises, but I hope that they move on and find better things to do, right? But there's the competent ones are continuing to level up because people don't want to lose good people. And when you look at that infill Class A, you're looking at that's not eating all of their disposable income, where the C's and D units, that's eating 35 to 42% of their disposable income is going straight to rent. That's a dangerous market that you're starting to see a huge uptick in not only vacancies, but delinquencies. And the delinquencies are even worse, especially if the politics in your city are aligned with the tenant, not the landlord.
Yeah, I like how you said that. That's that's very creative way of putting that. I like that. I like that. Yeah, I think what's happening is that whenever you have the inflationary pressure increasing, it's not so much the people that live in A's and B's, at least in this scenario anyway.
Most of the time it's not.
It's not. It's the folks in the C and D where they're making the decision of whether they're going to put food on a table or buy medicine. That's actual real thing.
Yeah.
I think that's where we're at right now. And I think that previous to this, I guess I'm not going to call it a narrative because it sounds like it's somehow wrong or bad or whatever, but. The thought process was that as the economy slowed down, B people or B tenants went to the C class, and the C class ended up going to the D's and whatever.
Well, but here's the thing, and I don't mean to qualify and classify people, but if you're in an A location, you're not going to just downgrade to a C location without fighting like hell and maybe even picking up a second job or another job. People like to live where they live, and if they can, they're going to stay upwardly mobile. But again, when you look at the demographic of who's in your A locations and who's in your A properties, they're not hurting like the C's and the D's are. And so they've got a little bit more room before they fall off the map, and we're seeing that they're staying put just fine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, part of it's also mindset, too. I mean, someone who's living in that. Yeah, because like I said, we see some of the folks that live in those D-class assets, and they have the whole different point of view,
whole different mindset,
whole different point of view on life, and it's not the most healthiest thing.
No,
but
you're also seeing some of those people too are finding that most during a recession like what we're headed into during economically tumultuous times is when more small businesses get started than any other time in history. And so I'm seeing it pop up where people have been laid off. They've maybe they see the writing on the wall and they're chasing that dream. They're moving out of New York. They're selling for $1 gajillion. They're moving to your end of the world where they can buy a nice house, have a nicer life than they had in New York City, and have some money left over to start a business. And that's where you're seeing that business expansion, that business growth in the small business areas. And when you start applying inflationary problems to businesses, usually businesses pass that on to the customer. The customer is the one that's struggling with it. So there's that balance for sales. But if you've built a good business, you're not struggling for sales. Your customers understand because they're all having to deal with it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it's see, I could tell you understand how economics works. Isn't like the business just pays for it and everybody just lives and everything's fine.
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. But there's that balance, and as business owners think different than consumers, right? And this is one of the reasons why I love the industrial space, especially in times like this, is because the business owner understands that the cost of doing business is going up. But guess what? That's not the landlord's problem to solve. If you're sitting there dealing with consumers in multifamily, now it's the landlord's problem to solve. I'm not getting a raise at work. Gas just went up. I don't have any money. Landlord, I'm delinquent. You solve my problem, right? A business owner tends to solve his own problem by going, okay, I'm going to add this gimmick. I'm going to have a Black Friday sale. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Or I'm just going to pass that on along to my customer in a small incremental way that's going to offset that. And so now your rent problem is solved by the tenant, not because they're business owners rather than the consumer mentality that's in the tenancy of a multifamily project.
Yeah. This is one of the things, like in our training, not that I'm plugging training or anything else like that, but we always start off with mindset. It's like stop thinking like like an everyday person, so to speak. And I don't sound like I'm saying anything bad about everyday people, but start thinking more like an entrepreneur, which is a very different way of thinking, Yeah. But speaking of the whole scenario of when it comes to rents and occupancy, industrial. I have a lot of friends that do industrial. They swear by industrial. They love industrial.
Yeah.
I look at it. I don't get it. I don't understand it, and I'll tell you why. It's because in my mind, I look at a blank space, and I bought one of these buildings, by the way. I own one of these things right now.
Yeah.
And what I did was I was able to line up a tenant for 10 years previous to even closing on the thing.
Sure.
I lined it up, closed it, executed the lease. Great. Right. Everything was done.
Right.
What I'm often afraid of, though, is if it's not like a national tenant, or just if it's an independent business or whatever, they up and leave, try to backfill that tenant space, that kind of thing. I mean, is that a real thing?
Absolutely.
Or am I missing something? Or why do people love this so much?
But see, here's the thing: you have somebody that is thinking about it from a business point of view. So let's talk about the difference between multi-tenant industrial and multifamily, right? So in multifamily, you've got no credit tenants, or they'd already bought a house, right? You have yearly renewals on the lease, right? And the good news is you can up that as much as you want until they leave. They're gonna wreck your crap, and they're gonna call you about it, right? And they are not going to interact well with others because they're going to feel that it's their domicile, and anybody that's making noise or poking things or dogs pooping in the yard or whatever is invading their domicile. Now you take a business owner who's going to sign a 3 to 5 year lease. They're going to personally guarantee it. They're going to have assets. You're going to put a rent adjustment rider in there, and if you do it like we do it, you have 3% and or CPI, whichever is greater, which most people didn't pay attention to until last year when my guys took a 9.5% bump on rents, right? That's just that's what the rider was, and that was what was pre-negotiated. I don't have to worry about that. You're going to have a tenant that looks at it and goes, that light bulb is out, my garbage disposal doesn't work, and if I call the landlord, they will fix it, take a 15 to 20% add to it and charge it back to me because it's in my triple nets. Because the way that those are all set up is the triple nets are the saving grace for everybody. The triple nets are all the property taxes, the maintenance, the insurance, how often we mow the lawn, how much snow removal we do, all of those kinds of things. But you have a business owner that wants snow removal done, is willing to pay for that. They want the best insurance because they've got things inside that are of value, and they would lose money if they were out of business. And so all of these things are an expense of the tenant that are reimbursed to the landlord. So my rent is my net. So I get my rent, and then I have my triple net, which is a reimbursement based on accounting. So if everybody's noticing right now, insurance rates are going up at least 30%, and in some cases as much as 60% nationwide. That's what's happening. But as an industrial landlord, I don't really care because it's being taken to the tenant, who is really the one that's using the insurance. When my property taxes go up, I don't really care. I hand that to the tenant. I give him one of these faces, right? But every January, we say, hey, last year we spent 23 cents a foot monthly on triple net or CAM charges, common area maintenance. Our estimate turned out to be 2 cents low. Here's the bill for the 2 cents on your square footage for the year, for the month times the years. And now we're going to go with a 25-cent estimate. You're going to pay that now, starting now. So every month they're sending you money to pay the bills with, and their rent is their rent. I went into one of my units that the guy's been in there for 8 years, and I walked in, and he'd redone the flooring and painted the office, and it looked really nice. And I told him, I said, didn't you need to get landlord approval to do that stuff? And he goes, yeah, I was going to have him do it, but he was just going to charge me 15% more and probably want to do it during work hours instead of on the weekends when I really needed it done. I said, man, you should really fire that landlord. And that's where the awkward silence came in, because he realized there was nowhere else for him to go. His 4,000 square feet, he would never be able to own his own building right? He was never going to be that big of an operation. He just needed his little space to do his thing. But then a lot of these guys, all they want is they want an office and a bathroom and a place to do whatever it is they do. I have guys that build silencers for handguns. I have guys that mill little tiny intricate parts for printers. I have guys that do service work. I have guys that do roofing, cabinet shops, window tinting, transmission repair, all these different businesses that are just the blue collar Americana. And they're very easy to swap in and out because you got drywall, walls, concrete floor, maybe a coat of paint when they move out. You've got actual security deposit that is equal to 1 month's rent. You've got a bulletproof building. You've got the things that you need without having the issues of what are we going to do when the carpet's blown up or the dog peed everywhere, right? It's a whole different mentality. And this is why I like the multi-tenant and the 2,000 to 5,000 square foot individual users, because they're everywhere. When I got a 100,000 square foot building, I kind of have a 100,000 square foot user in mind. If I've got a 3,000 square foot user, one of my tenants is Hoveround, right? They do the little, disabled person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're going to move out. I'm going to literally sweep the floor, move the rack that they moved in, and put somebody else in. Literally nothing, right? And there's a lot of people needing that space that have had a great idea. They've started a business. Now the business has gotten past their own garage, and they're going to move into the space. But the thing that for me, especially in uncertain times like this where everything's getting weird, right? I mean, property taxes are going up and municipalities are continuing to push, and there's the service fee for everything. I love the fact that that is not really my concern. I mean, vicariously it is, because if it gets too much, that's going to affect what the tenant can pay because there's all the other burden. But at the same time, we don't have to have the discussion that you got to have when you go to your tenant and go, hey, listen, man, property taxes went up and my insurance went up and the lawn care, we just had this big sewer line break and all this stuff. And the tenant's like, wow, that sucks. I'm going to move out at the end of the month anyway, and you can find somebody else to put in here after I destroyed the carpet, and you try and take all that out of my $300 deposit, and
Right.
good luck trying to sue me. I'm probably not even going to leave on time anyway, and when I do, I'm going to leave you this beautiful sofa that we stole, right?
Yeah.
Versus the other side of it. So for me, if I build and develop and do a lot of multifamily, and there's a lot of money in that, and we make really excellent returns for our investors, doing that, and that's been phenomenal. My personal holdings are industrial because, when the lead broker for one of the top 3 brokerages here in town, when he came to me and said, hey, I'm getting ready to retire and I want 5 industrial buildings that even my wife could manage when I'm gone. Of all the things, he's brokered everything from supermarkets to, he brokered everything. He wanted to convert his money into small bay industrial so that after he was gone, even his wife could manage it. And it was just the bottom. That was the first step out of the garage, entrepreneurial spirit of Americans. That's what's going to happen. And in the 7 years since I built those for him, he's had some turnover. But like some of mine, he's going to have some of those tenants that moved in 7 years ago, and they're going to be there in another 20.
I gotta wonder then, the same rule applies, it seems, in terms of finding those great locations. It still comes down to location, right? I mean, it seems that in some of the locations that I frequent, just because here in the Midwest, there's, it's the Midwest, right? Let's just call it what it is. There's probably not nearly as much activity as there would be for, say, somewhere in like Texas or where in your neck of the woods or
yeah,
Florida,
we just closed
whatever,
in Houston last week, right?
Yeah,
and we're 2 miles from the interstate. We're 5 miles from the hospital. We're brand new. We're the newest building in a newer area of industrial. You're right. And those tenants are willing to pay $1.20 a foot for their space, where you could go over the other side of the tracks. You can find 70-cent space, 80-cent space, and you got to bring your own armed guard with you, But it is, you get what you pay for, and the tenants are respectful of that because they don't want to be there. One of my tenants down there in that building we just bought has 3 really expensive, they're about $700,000 CNC machine, and he mills plastic parts from all over the world. They send him a computer design, he etches it out. He doesn't want to have to worry about a leaky roof or faulty electrical or 25-year-old building. He wanted a nice building. He's done a nice job with cleaning up the space and painting it all the way he wants it. Then he moves in his $1 million, $2 million worth of machinery, and he's going to be there for a long time, because to close down his business for a day is going to cost him more than my rent raise.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right. Yeah.
So we're going to be buddies for a long, long time, that guy and I.
It's very sticky. It's similar to net lease. So yeah, just like you said, like we do net lease too. And I think that it's very, very sticky. I think, you know what it is that it always seemed that whenever I drive by one of these industrial spaces, it seems like it's vacant for a very, very, very long time. And I don't know that if it's just a thing where I'm just noticing it, or I'm incorrect, or whatever, or what, you know. So is I guess is that a real thing, or again, does it come down to location?
A lot of it has to do with location. A lot of it has to do with growing businesses. You know, we like the Houston market. It's exploding. Lots of blue collar workers there. Lots of the port traffic is picking up. But you know, even the stuff we had here in Idaho during 2008 and 9, we had one space that was vacant for 28 days. Just one, right? We've always been able to backfill very quickly. Very limited tenant improvement needed, and so we're always bullish on it because there's always somebody looking for space. And it's not something, cities don't love industrial, right? They hear the term and they think of this dirty old metal building that they're building, you know, I don't know, part of a copper mine in or something like that. You know, they're refining uranium or something, you know, really nasty in there. That's what cities think about, not this multi-tenant stuff that has, you know, these other businesses. So location is very important. And then being in a growing, vibrant economy is also very, very, very important, because you need that net import of people building businesses. And then the other thing is, once they've got their business built, they don't want to move because their tenants know, or their clients, their customers know where they're at. So they are very sticky.
I like that. It's maybe we ought to take another look at doing some of those, because the reason why we do net lease is for that reason. I think it makes for a very compelling case. I think you're doing your own deals, but we have a blind pool, like I told you in the green room.
Yeah.
We have a blind pool. We put money together from investors, and we just go and acquire these assets. Most people love it because of the corporate guarantee, you know. Right. And sure, it's not, you know, it's whenever we're talking industrial, we're not. Obviously, it's not Starbucks or Dollar General, or it could be, I suppose. It could be, but not always. I mean, those are giant places for that.
Things that I have concern about, those are the two things that I have concern about. Is one, we always see corporate bean counters make changes, and then all of a sudden you have a space that's sitting vacant, which is fine. They're going to keep paying, right? But it's a single tenant building, so you're going to, and then I look at it and go, man, if Dollar General can't make it in that location, what could I honestly put in there? And the second thing that I see is that people like Dollar General or, you know, Walgreens or Starbucks, they will pay an absolute premium to be in a location. So with that premium comes a cap rate that's associated with that, right? And the good news is about the triple net industrial, those cap rates are sixes, mid sixes to sevens right now. So that's what we're buying at, which is back to normal. But when you're looking at, you know, QVC or QVS or one of these, you know, big ones, Dollar General, they're paying a little bit above market for the location and everything else. So if they can't make it, what's going to go in there? And are you ever going to get back to that dollar amount? So that's where I've looked at it and said, man, I'm going to take a step down and a step over, and I'm going to stick with the local guys. I'm going to stick with the smaller spaces that I can backfill. The building we just bought was 35,000 feet. I got 12 tenants. You know, I got to have a lot of things go wrong to get to a 50% occupancy, right? But the thing about these, like you know, is that usually deals like this, cash flow day one. That is so huge, right? There's no appreciation in it. I mean, the deals that we do, there is always some appreciation, but you're cash flowing from the get-go, and it's really hard to lose your shirt if you've got cash flow.
That's right. That's right. I mean, that's why I love doing those sorts of deals. You know, it's that's one of the reasons why we've been pushing into the net lease business, and maybe industrial is the place to think of next. You know, maybe I ought to take another look at doing something like that. So I think the biggest part of it though is finding investors, right? So when we made the shift from multifamily then to development, it wasn't that big of a leap, right? I mean, there was a leap of some sort because these investors weren't really accustomed to doing development, so we had to train them on what development meant.
And that's the truth, right? It wasn't really a leap; it was an education process.
Education, and we pulled some of these investors into thinking about cash flow and the importance of cash flow. That was a little bit easier to do,
right?
Just because once you don't have to explain it one time, and many the investor pool. They go to these places literally every day. Like they know what Starbucks is. They've been there, and they know what Dollar General is. They go there, right?
Exactly.
So then getting them into industrial may take something else. So where do you source your current investors or your new investors? And how do you actually find those folks and pull them in?
The first conversation I ever have with anybody is, what kind of investor are you? Because I believe there's three kinds. There's the cash flow investor, right, which is typically 50 plus years old, looking at the slowing down, retiring, offsetting their actual working hours with passive income to a complete degree, and they have a couple $1,000,000 to invest. Then you've got your busy young professionals that are looking for the tax benefits only, right? I'm 35-year-old doctor or lawyer. I'm making a ton of money. I'm getting killed on my taxes. Help me save money on taxes. And then there's the average investor that is probably about 45% of our whole pool, and they're looking for appreciation. They're looking at the fastest way to get their $300,000 to the $2 million mark, and so they're looking at appreciation. And based on what I feel those guys are is how we then take them to the next step. Because if you're looking for appreciation, industrial is not for you. Industrial is that slow and steady wins the race. It's going to be 3% or CPI, which could be as high as 7% this year. Probably going to go back down to that 3% range. And so your asset is only growing in value by 3%, which means a 10-year haul means that your $10 million asset is only worth $13 million. It's not the place to get rich. It's the place to get cash flow, right? And then again, industrial tends to have less cost involved per square foot. So your depreciation is less. So for your guys looking to offset their W-2 and looking for that depreciation, that tax benefit, it's really not the best one for them either. And so you just have to understand your investors, because when you're trying to put the wrong guy in the right hole, it makes it problematic. But if you've educated them as to what this does, hey, Jim, we're coming out of this appreciation deal and you just made $300,000. Nice job. Let's start putting some of that into cash flow that you just kind of set and forget, that's going to give you 6 to 7% cash on cash. So you're going to start building up that residual cash flow, and we're going to reinvest some more into your appreciation or your tax strategies, whatever the case may be. So we really make sure that we understand what they do, what they know, what they want. And then from there, we educate them as to why they may want to look at this to reach that goal or that to reach that goal, but never try and set the goal for them.
I like that. Yeah, I think that's you are educating them in some way, but I think first off, identifying the type of investor they are. I think that's an approach that many people just they seem to forget, or maybe even the investor doesn't really know. They don't understand it. Just because
I found a lot of investors that come to me with $250,000 wanting to invest in cash flowing deals, and I'm like, you're 45 years old, $250,000. What is 7% going to get you on that? Are you going to be able to replace your income with that? And when the answers start to come back no, then they start to look at, well, what do I need to do? And then you say, well, what are you trying to do? And then you have those conversations and you educate them. And then they look at it and go, wow, I really like that, because now I know why I'm doing it. Not just that here's a deal and it's real estate, so it must be a good deal, so I must need to do it. And then they understand where to put their money. So they feel a lot more comfortable up front about where they deployed and why.
That's right. I mean, it's customizing the solution for the investor, right? And that's the thing. I think for the longest time now, there's a lot of guys, especially in social media, the immediate default is invest in the C-class multifamily, value add. It's the same thing over and over and over again. It doesn't always work.
They've run out they value added all that they can, and the rents are as high as they're going to go, and the tenant just can't pay anymore.
Right. That's what's happening.
Yep, all over.
We're lucky that we bought a lot of our assets a long time ago. So it's but yeah, to try to acquire these days, it's very, very tricky. There's always deals out there. You just got to be very good at underwriting the deals and make sure you're picking up the right ones, because you can easily pick up the wrong deal.
Oh yeah.
And I think, but I also think though too, by preparing for the downturn, and there is a downturn coming.
Oh yeah, we all know that. There's always a downturn coming.
There's always a downturn. Yeah. So it's
Unless
like if you're
finished one, right?
Right. Unless you just finished one. Yeah. But I mean, there's still like right now, it can't stay this high forever. It just can't. No. Eventually, it's going to come back down to earth too.
Right.
And when that happens, you have to be positioned as a buyer to get in there and acquire those assets.
But here's the thing. Back to what we were just talking about, though. That's never going to change your cash flow, right?
No.
So and that's where we have always been a buyer, right? We have always been a buyer when we can make a deal make sense, and the easiest thing to buy right now is cash flow, because that makes sense all the time. You take the cash flow, you take the net mortgage payment, you come down to the bottom of it, you apply that to the equity, and if the equity's got cash flow, you got a decent deal, right? And as long as you're looking at multiple ways to solve that cash flow problem, you're good. That's where a lot of people are. They've learned this real estate game in the last couple years, not the last couple decades, and they're trying to go into this with a value add strategy, looking for cash flow, and that's never going to meet.
It's not going to work. It doesn't work.
Never going to meet.
It doesn't work. You're going to get your cash when you refi. That's the only time.
Absolutely.
That's the only time you're going to get it. And that's okay too. It's fine.
Yep.
Just understand that's what the plan is,
yep.
right? So I know we were talking in the green room, and it was a lot of fun talking in the green room. We shared a lot of experience here too. So what are your predictions for the next 6 to 12 months? Where do you see the market headed? Where do you see things maybe heading in the economic side too?
I think that the uncertainty is going to grow. I think that it's going to become even more. I think you're going to see more SVBs of the world pop up. I think you're going to see more problems come to the surface. And I think it's going to spook a lot of people. I think it's also going to be a great opportunity to acquire assets, because you're going to be buying things that are cash flowing, that are making sense at prices that make even more sense. I also think that the dollar's in trouble. And when the dollar's in trouble, the only thing that's happening, look, let's just be honest. Your apartment that you bought 20 years ago is not changed at all. It's not grown another room. It's not added a third floor. It's still exactly the 60 units or the 100 units that you bought. It's just the dollar's taken a dump, and now you got to put in twice as many of these paper things to acquire that asset of yours. And so what I'm telling everybody right now is, if you think the stock market is scary now, wait 6 months. It'll be terrifying. What you need to do is convert your dollars into physical assets that actually do things, so that you have something that you can retrade for something. I don't care if it's bullets or gold and silver or buildings, because people will always need to rent things. But like with Venezuela, like with Colombia right now, you're seeing their prices are falling, but people are gathering these massive amounts of money to exchange for the rents, to exchange for the goods and services, because everybody's just printed it and it's fake. So the whole thing is, there's a problem there, and that is that there's an unequal trade between the two that you can solve by holding on to a physical asset. Gold and silver, here's the analogy that I always use. In the 1920s, you could have bought a fine men's suit, handcrafted suit for a $20 gold piece. Okay? In the 1960s, you could have bought a fine men's suit for a $20 gold piece. A gold piece today, a $20 gold piece today, is worth about $2,500. How much is a handcrafted men's suit? About $2,500. So the asset hasn't changed. The paper has. And what I keep trying to tell people is, get your head in the game to understand, convert the greenbacks to real things in the next 12 months. Is going to be imperative, because it's going to change a lot, but you're still going to own an asset that's still going to be worth 25 cheeseburgers or whatever it is, So make sure that you're invested in assets.
Yeah, love it. So great. So what sort of bulletproof advice, aside from that, which is good. What sort of bulletproof advice would you have for someone listening right now? They heard a lot of different things here. I know we talked a lot about industrial, talked a lot about development. What bulletproof advice would you have just based on everything else?
If you don't understand it, don't invest in it. And it's that simple. Now, it doesn't mean that, I bought a nice watch. It doesn't mean I had to understand how to make the watch. But what it does mean is if I don't understand time, the concept of time, I don't need a watch. So if you're going to invest, if I'm going to invest in one of your deals, and it's funny to me how many people invest with me that have never been to my location, right? And I appreciate their trust. But when you're investing in something, and you need to understand it, you need to understand what the options are. You need to understand the underwriting. And if you can't get that from the syndicator, the sponsor that you're working with, don't invest with them because they don't understand it. You need to know somebody that knows how to pull the levers, that knows how to do the deals. And if they can't explain it to you in a way that you can conceptually understand it and know what your 2 options or your 3 options are, your plan B, your plan C is, make sure that you understand that before you make the investment, and take the time to become educated. Because if you don't understand it, you should invest in it.
Yeah, love it. Love it. All right, guys. And, good. So, guys, if you want to reach out to Shannon, reach him via his website at shannonrobnett.com. Hope you got some great insight on the industrial space, okay, the development space, of course, too, which, as many of you guys know, I'm really strong in. And so, Shannon, it's whenever you're seeing this cap rate compression take place, turn your attention, pivot, look to other asset classes to possibly invest in, I think that that's a good way to start thinking about different assets, especially now when you want to start having a lot more cash flow, more than ever. Now it's super important to have that cash flow coming in, all right? We're in for some bumpy ride in the next 6 to 12 months. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I will talk to you again soon.
You've been listening to the Bulletproof Cash Flow Show. We hope you've enjoyed the show. We know we had fun. Make sure to visit our Apple Podcast page and leave us a 5-star review. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. For real estate coaching, events, and resources, hit up bulletproofcashflow.com. Till next time.
No information in this episode should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Any investment opportunities mentioned on this show are limited to accredited or sophisticated investors. Any investments will only be made with proper disclosure and subscription documentation and subject to all applicable laws. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice.